Right, let's see if we can get this to behave itself this morning. Alrighty, so let's jump onto all fours so we can make an assessment of where your hands, wrists, shoulders are at now, and then see how that improves by the end of this half hour. So if you come onto all fours, I don't want you to correct or fix anything. I just want you to listen to these questions and just see what might be applicable to you. So when you look at your hands, I want you to notice how you chose to place them. So are they lining up with your knees? Are they narrower than that or wider than that? Then I want you to notice, if you look at your fingers, are there any spaces between the fingers, or do they look all quite closed in towards each other? Where is your thumb in relation to your fingers? So by that I just mean, is your thumb close to your first finger, slightly away, or right out to the side? Do you have a sense of where your shoulders are in relation to your wrists? So are your shoulders back here or far forward? And then lastly, are you somebody that over uses your elbow joint so it looks like this? The elbow is pushed forward instead of over the wrist. All right, and then just check out for me, how does it feel now I've kept you here for a few moments? Are you already just wanting this to end so you can just come off your wrist completely? Which is what we're going to do. So you're going to take a seat, and it doesn't matter how you sit. The only thing I want you to be able to do is put your hand on a flat surface. What I don't want you to do is have to bow forward and round your back. So if that's you, grab your block or your book, or maybe two blocks and books, whatever you need, so that your hand can go onto a flat surface. Okay, I'm going to do that just because it's better for the camera. And maybe I'm going to go this way so it's wider. So then I want you to pull out all of your fingers and create as much space between them as you can. And then that little thumb that might have this inclination to be right up against the first finger, eventually we want the thumb to be able to point out to the side. So it makes like a letter L between the middle finger and the thumb. The more and more that this closes in, the more potentially it can trap or impinge the nerve that runs all the way up your arm and in towards your neck. And this nerve serves the thumb, the first finger, and about half of the middle finger. So we really want to keep all the space here so that this can move and work freely. Now, if you've been going around for a few years with your thumb moving closer and closer to your first finger and the spaces between the fingers closing down, me telling you today that you should have your thumb able to pull out in this position is not going to happen. Like, you can probably pull it out to there, but then to weight bear on it will not be that much fun. So if you think between where you are right now, where we want to go, there's a middle ground in that. So can you pull the thumb to that space? Now, we've been working on this in my classes this week. So my thumb is really freed up a lot between Monday and Saturday morning. So I'm going to pull the thumb out quite a way, but you do not need to do that. Now, right now, nothing in your arm is having to do too much because the hand is resting. So now as you pick your arm up, I want you to see what changed. So did you suddenly see fingers that all closed up, a thumb that went back in alongside itself? Can you open everything back up? Now I want you to see, when you pull back on your wrist, what happens with your fingers and thumbs. So to get the wrist to pull back to the position it has to be on when you're on the floor, do the fingers and thumbs close back in? Can you let your wrist release slightly and then go back and pull everything out as much as you possibly can? So it's kind of weird to feel a stretch in your hand. I think it is anyway. I think people are very used to feeling stretches in their legs or in the side of their neck, but they don't really think about the tissue of the hand also having that ability to feel a stretch. So that's what we're looking for. We're not looking to hunt down pain. So if it's uncomfortable, you want to back off. You're just being a little bit too enthusiastic. But now that we've held there for a few moments, play with, could I bend the wrist back a hair more? And now can you open the fingers and thumbs a hair more? Now, while we hold this new position where we put a little bit more load on the tissue, what did your elbow do? Okay, now I have a thick jumper on because it's really cold today, but I can see that my elbow bent a little bit. So the compensation has moved up the arm because the focus is here. So I'm going to try to straighten out the elbow again. I have a tendency to overlock, so I have to watch for that. And then pull back on the wrist a little bit more, open out the fingers. And for me, the problem is always this first finger likes to nestle in. So my work is more here, but some of you might feel the work is more in trying to get that thumb out. And then lastly, now that we're really holding a lot of tension, do you notice that your shoulder has crept up round your ear? And can you just let that relax back and down? And then with relief, let the hand come down. Now, please don't shake the wrist. Just let your hand come and rest. Okay, let's do that on the other side. So place your hand onto whatever, floor, block, books. And then now, while that tissue is not having to hold anything, can you space everything out as much as possible? So remember, we're looking for what Jill Miller calls a tolerable discomfort. Okay, stretching is not always fun, but it doesn't need to be painful, not in my world anyway. And then you're going to slide the arm forward and up and see the moment that you ask all these arm muscles to start to hold the arm, does that affect something in the hand? And if it does, can you pull it back out? Now, when you go to bend the wrist, what happens? Do you see the fingers start to close back in? So maybe if that's you, you ease off the wrist a little bit. You don't go for such a hard bend. And we really work on pulling the fingers and thumbs out. And if you look at your fingers, you can often see when there isn't equal spacing, when something is having a harder time moving away from something else, and maybe that's where your focus goes. Then you see, can you pull the wrist back a little bit more? So as we pull the wrist back, now do you see the elbow buckling? And you're not going to answer yes to every question, but we're just going to keep going up and down the chain. So if the answer is yes, you see, can I straighten my elbow a little bit more? And if I'm not going to let this compensate, what changed back in my hand? And then I go back to, can I open the fingers more? Can I pull the wrist back more? My hand is actually starting to shake a little bit with the effort, but that's okay. And then just maybe you let the shoulder soften and release. And then from here, let it come down, but remember, don't shake anything. Just let the hand rest for a moment. Okay, now we're going to look at the hand in another position before we move on to some of the other culprits that can be playing. So again, you do not have to sit this way. You can just sit with the legs out long or sit yourself up on a block. But I want you to take your hand and turn it over so that you're on the back of the hand. And then this also is a place that can really show up lines of tension. So you guys might be able to see my thumb. It almost looks like a bit of a banana. So I want to try to work that out of the thumb and see if I can go away from this hitchhiker mode into a straighter thumb. Then I'm going to look at all the fingers and see, okay, can I have some space there? And then slowly, slowly, you can begin to put some weight forward onto that arm. So you can choose, because this can be very different for everybody. I'm going to try and bring it more forward under my shoulder. It's a better place. Okay. And this is about probably my tolerance level at the moment, particularly because the thumb side of my hand is not down on the floor. Now, this is where, if you are a hyperextender, you guys are going to have to watch this like crazy, because oftentimes I can get my hand into a position because I just push my elbow forward like this and get it out the way. So you need to make sure that elbow softens and comes back. As a hyperextender, it might feel like you're having to bend a lot. Now I want you to look at where your elbow crease is. So is this elbow crease able to face forward, or is yours trying to do this and turn in? So can you play with turning it forward and then maybe softening it? And then slowly again, peel back off the hands and let it release. Okay, let's do the same thing on the other side. So turn the hand over, resting on the back of your hand. It's going to come up on the other elbow. Okay, so once you have that, the first thing you're going to look at is, can you get your wrist underneath your shoulder instead of pushing it back behind you? And if you can't, it's fine. You've already answered the question that there's tension in that arm line. Then have a look at the fingers. Can you space them out? And then what is the thumb doing? Is it trying to go into that hitchhiker mode? Can you make the bones a little bit straighter? How close can you get this wrist junction to sit on the floor? And then what's your elbow crease doing? So you might be able to see how on this arm, the elbow crease faces in. It doesn't naturally turn forward. This is the more rolled in shoulder. So I'm going to play with turning that elbow crease forward. I know on this arm, the hyperextend won't happen, so I don't have to watch that, but it might for you. So you might have to, again, just be careful that you're not pushing that elbow forward, but keeping it really lined up underneath the wrist. And then those naughty fingers have closed back in and the thumb has gone and done its funky thing again. And then you can play with walking the knees back, okay, because I know this side is a work in progress. Loading more weight on the tissue is not appropriate right now. This is enough of a stretch. And then slowly, slowly, slowly peel the hands off and let them release. So let's just take the hand part and see if you are in a movement class and you need to go on all fours and your hands are really painful. Let's just play with whether the strategy of blocks or books might help you. So hands, if you rest the back of your hands on your legs, and again, you could be seated, you don't have to be this way, you'll notice that fingers naturally curl in. When your hand is relaxed, it's not relaxed with the fingers pushed out, they tend to soften. So we could take some of what we've done and this thought of a cupped hand and let the blocks help you out. So you place the blocks about the width of your shoulders and put them down. When you put the hands on, we're going to play with that idea of the thumb and the middle finger making the letter L. So you're going to see if you can get your thumb to drape over the block and then the fingers to drape over the block. Now, this often really shows up the hand that isn't lying straight ahead on the floor. It's really common for me to see hands that are doing this. They're turning out or they're rotating. So a knuckle or knuckles are not sitting on the floor. So the moment that isn't happening, I know the weight is not distributed evenly over the whole hand. It's being distributed into a very specific part. And if you take class with me, we've talked about this on the feet. It's no different with the hands. So you may not be able to point them to straight today, but you are going to notice if your hands want to meander off or are trying to curl. And you're going to make a micro change to that, because every single time you make a micro change, more of you starts to get used. And then you're going to see when you come up onto the blocks, let me go this way. How does that change things for you? Now, here's what you don't need to do. You don't need to grip the fingers in. You can let them drape and relax. The same with the thumb. You can let that drape and relax over the side of the block. And then play with the hand position. Do you want to let more of that thumb pad hang down over the block, less of the thumb pad? Where's a place that feels better for you? Because right now we just want that tissue to be open, able to open up and stretch with something that will help it. And then over time we can work the hands lower and lower and lower. Okay, so we've addressed the hands, but what we haven't really thought about is the root cause of what might be creating problems in your hands. So one of them I've already referred to, of a shoulder or shoulders that like to round in, because as soon as they come in, they close down this space between the head of the arm bone and the rib cage. So the muscles and the tissue here eventually begin to get held into one position. And then when you come on all fours and you need this space to be more open, everything's kind of like, I don't know what you want me to do. This is what I do. I don't really do this. And then we're back to starting to dump weight on a very specific part of your hand. So let's address that now. I want you to come and lie on your back. I'm going to try and scoot right over so that I can keep my hand where you can see it. Okay, so when you bend your knees and put your feet flat on the floor, instead of putting them in the habitual place that you always like to, walk the feet a little further forward. Now take one arm off to the side. But can you see how I'm not pointing it straight out to the side? I'm angling it down. Now I'm going to angle mine down more than I would like to make sure that you guys can see it. But you really just want to be able to bring it on a slight diagonal down. I want you to be able to relax the top of the shoulder down. Okay, so we are palm up, back of the hand down on the floor. Space out the fingers and thumbs. And just notice, does all of the back of the hand lie on the floor, or can you already feel that that thumb side is not that keen to be on the floor? Take the other hand and cup the head of that arm bone. So people, when they say shoulder to me, they either mean the top or they mean this. So we're going to refer to this as the head of the arm bone because that is what it is. It isn't really the shoulder. So from here, in slow motion, you're going to pick up the thumb and the thumb pad. Then you're going to pick up the first finger knuckle. Middle finger knuckle. How are you doing? Coming up in one big solid chunk. Ring finger knuckle. And now we're turning onto the baby finger side of your hand. Now we're going to lay the palm down. So we're going to lay the underside of the baby finger and its knuckle, the underside of the ring finger and its knuckle, same with the middle finger, you get the gist of this, until the thumb is down. Now, if your shoulder is doing what it's supposed to be doing, you're going to notice the head of this arm bone is starting to become more round-shouldered. There's one more turn we're going to try and get out. So can you lift baby finger and knuckle, middle finger and knuckle, sorry, ring finger and knuckle, middle finger and knuckle, first finger and knuckle, and now can you lift the hand and turn it on the tip of the thumb? So the head of this arm bone has rolled itself in. Ideally, this now feels very round-shouldered. If there's no change, we know the shoulder is stuck into the back position, and we want to be able to practice this so it can move forward. Now we're going to roll back in that same articulation of the thumb and thumb pad, first finger and knuckle, middle knuckle and finger, ring knuckle and finger, baby knuckle and finger, and then you get the gist of it. So now you peel off the thumb, you roll through the hand, and we eventually work back to that start position where you're on the back of the hand with the palm facing up. Now, oftentimes the next turn is the trickiest one because it's where the head of this arm bone has to be able to roll back. So now can you pick up the baby finger and its knuckle, ring finger and its knuckle, middle finger and knuckle. And if they're all coming as a clump, it's fine. You know there's work to be done. First finger and knuckle, and then the whole hand turns to come onto the tip of the thumb. And ideally, the head of that arm bone rolled back and down. Now, this time we're not going to focus so much on the hand as the shoulder. So can you roll the back of the hand down until we're back to that palm up? Now tumble to the baby finger side of the hand, and as you cup the head of this arm bone, give it a little bit of a pull to encourage it to roll forward and in. Keep tumbling and see if you can get right on the end of your thumb. Now we're going to tumble all the way back, and now your hand is going to help the head of that bone to guide back and down. And then let that release. Let both arms come and rest by your side for a moment, and just see if just that tiny little bit of focus of rolling back and forth has changed the way that your shoulder lies on the mat. Let's do one more thing before we change to the other side. So bring that arm up with the palm facing in towards the center of your body. Okay, just relax the top of the shoulder down, and now reach for your ceiling and drop down. Instead of reaching for the ceiling now, can you think about where your wall and ceiling meet and reach to that point and down? Do you feel how your shoulder blade is coming off the floor and back down to the floor? Can you ponder this question? Can you pick up your shoulder blade so it reaches your arm and then drop it down? Or do you have to reach your arm to pull your shoulder blade up? The first one is the one that I want you to think about. I want you to see, can you get your shoulder blade to lift and lower so that it takes the arm, or can you only move it because the arm is reaching? Now, the next time you reach, turn or roll your head comfortably away from your arm and bring it back. Take a moment to look at the screen. See how subtle the roll away is and back. I'm not trying to force anything. I don't need to do a big neck turn. I just want to let my head comfortably roll and come back. Roll and come back. Notice if there's any breath holding going on. Can you work your way away from that? One more time. And then lay that arm back and down. And again, bring the other one by your side. Just go palm up for me. And notice, is there a difference between one shoulder and the other? Now, before we do the other side, let's turn on to all fours and just see whether working on that shoulder has made a difference to how that hand can interact with the floor. So we're going to space out the fingers and the thumb, and you can do this on the blocks if you want to. Now, when you come here, you want to line your shoulder up over your wrist, but what we don't want is the head of this shoulder rolling itself in. You're going to see if you can roll that back. Can you see the difference? This is the roll forward and in. This is the roll back, or if I come this way, this is the arm I'm doing. That's the shoulder rolling in. That's the shoulder rolling back. Okay, so you're going to take that shoulder and roll it back. And depending on what mobility it has, in time, when it can sit itself back and down, your elbow crease will naturally look out over your fingers. Okay, so let's go do that on the other side. We'll move a little bit quicker because there's one more thing that I want to get in before we leave the class. Okay, so arm comes out to the side. Again, I'm going to have mine lower than I want you to have. You would be straight out to the side and then drop a little so that we can encourage the top of the shoulder to relax down. Spare hand comes and cups the head of that arm bone, and your palm up, back of the hands on the floor, and you've remembered to walk your feet maybe a little forward of where you would have liked to place them. Okay, so here we go, picking up the thumb first and then working through each finger, knowing that we're going to be turning onto the baby finger side of your hand. When you get there, you keep going, and you start to articulate the knuckles and fingers down. And already the head of that arm bone should be responding to this, starting to bring itself forward and in. And this would be, if you went on all fours, your elbow crease looking in at its friend. Now pick up the baby finger side of the hand and then see if you can articulate the fingers and knuckles one at a time to come up on the tip of your thumb. And if you can get to this position, the head of that arm bone is really rounded in. So we've shortened up all that space between the arm bone and the rib cage. Now start to lay everything back down. And then pulling up the thumb, first finger, and then working your way through each one of them as we come back on the baby finger side of your hand, laying yourself over on the back of the hand and just seeing, do you feel the head of that arm bone moving back and down? And then remember, there's one more turn here where we pick up all the fingers and see whether you can turn the arm to get right on the tip of the thumb. And at that moment, the head of that arm bone should have rolled back and down. And then let's just take one more tumble where you're not so focused on the hand as you are on encouraging this arm bone to roll forward and in. And this would be a great homework until you can really feel that you can articulate all of these knuckles and fingers individually, and you can feel the head of this arm bone doing what it needs to. Because the most common compensation is for people to spin the elbow creases to face forward because that's what they've been told to do, but they're doing the spinning at the wrist and then dumping a ton more weight into the thumb side of the hand than they need to. We really want the elbow creases to find their way to the right position because your shoulder can sit itself where it needs to. Okay, and then we're going to let that release. Now, while we're down here, we're just going to put this together with something else. So I want you now just to find the two front bones of your pelvis and roll the pelvis back so the lower back comes towards the floor. And then roll the pelvis forward so the lower back comes away from the floor. And where you're touching these two bones, they're dropping back towards your waistline as the lower back comes down, and then they're popping up toward the ceiling. Now, can you do this roll back on an exhale breath and the roll forward on an inhale breath? And I've referenced the lower back because that's the easiest one for people to kind of feel coming down and coming up. But when you roll the pelvis back and the lower back comes to the floor, that should be like a little wave that goes all the way up the spine. You should be able to feel more pressure comes on each backbone all the way up to the base of the neck. And then when you roll the pelvis forward and your low back bones begin to arch, if you keep that pelvis spinning forward, all of those back bones eventually should be able to come off the floor. If you're noticing that you can't get very far up the spine before you're like, I have no clue whether there's weight coming down, coming off, I don't even know what you're talking about, potentially your pelvis isn't able to get the yin and the yang of its movement. It's stuck more in one direction than the other. Now, the issue with this is when you roll the pelvis back into that tuck and the lower back is coming to the floor, the shoulders should naturally roll in and the palms should naturally want to turn to the floor. When you roll the pelvis forward and you arch the back, as you move up the spine, the shoulders should naturally roll back and the palms should face toward the ceiling. So as you exhale and roll back, everything rolls in and down. And then as you inhale, everything rolls back and up. So can you see how the issue with the hands could be a problem with the pelvis not moving as freely as it should be, or there's something further up the spine that just isn't responding to the pelvis. But now you have some tools to help you begin to correct this. What we haven't talked about is how the legs or the feet might be holding your pelvis back, but we can only deal with so much in a half-hour session. So let's come back onto all fours one last time. And because we don't have enough time, I'll make a separate post because there's one more move that can really be like a magic bullet for the shoulders. So I'll do that separately for you guys. So whether you're going to use the blocks or not, you're going to place the hands, you're going to look at your knuckles and see if you need to play with the positioning of the hands to get all the knuckles down. And I want you to put your hands towards the outer edges of the mat. Space your fingers and thumbs out, and then bring your shoulders to sit over your wrists. Now we know that if you like to get on all fours in this position, or even worse, this position, you're going to force the shoulders inward and you're going to force the weight down on your thumb pads. So firstly, you bring your knees underneath your pelvis, and then take the pelvis between those two positions, tucking under, releasing out. Now, I don't want the extreme tucked under, but I don't want the extreme out either. There is a middle ground between those two. And then you're going to see, can you close your eyes, think of the head of that left arm bone, can you turn that back? Now, can you take the head of the right arm bone and turn that back? And then let your eyes open. Now, can your shoulders and your arms hold this position as you extend a leg back, lift it up, lower it down, bring it in? So what changed? Do you need to turn an arm bone out? Did your thumbs or fingers close in? Did you tuck your bum under or stick it out? So when you extend the leg, little lift, don't need a big lift right now, and bring it in. Can you go one more on each side, looking to see, can you maintain everything you've put into your shoulders and your hand position by keeping your pelvis where you set it? And then that is all that I have for you this morning. And as I said, I will do a separate post on the magic bullet for the shoulders, but hopefully that's given you some stuff to do as homework if you're one of my guys, or maybe some tips for those of you that teach other people that you can give them stuff to do as homework to help them out. Thank you for joining me, and don't forget to comment below if you enjoyed it, if there was anything that was helpful for you, or if you have any questions. And don't forget to like or follow my page so you get notified of the next live.